Hey y'all, my name is Priscilla and welcome back to my channel, Bookie Charm. For today's video, I'm going to be doing the mid-year book freakout tag. Okay y'all, so we know what this is. Let's just get into it. No fancy introduction. I have my questions written here. Don't have any books selected, so it's going to be a surprise to me too. But the first question is the best book you've read so far in 2021. So I have a good amount of books to choose from. I think that I've read so far 49 books this year, which is a pretty good amount. One of the most recent books that I read is actually the best book that I've read so far. And that's going to be Dear Sentaran, a Black Spirit memoir by Akwaeke Emezi. Y'all know that I am an Emezi fan. I've read most of their books, if not all their books by now, and this is their first nonfiction memoir. It's a series of essays speaking all about their existence in the flesh as an Abonje. And in Nigerian Igbo culture, an Abonje is a spirit, and they are a flesh with multiple selves. It's still very hard for me to talk about their work because it's just so different than my very Western knowledge of spirituality. And I think that in their book, in all these essays, which are very, very emotional, there's a lot of content warnings. There's suicide and suicide ideation, as well as cannibalism. And I'll leave a full list of all that. But I think that in their just supreme, superior writing style, they are able to touch on what it means to exist in this world as they do and how they've become a successful author, their journey through writing. And many of the essays are actually dedicated to formative people in their life. So I'm just a big fan and I've just finished this book pretty recently. The audiobook was narrated by the author themselves. So just a really, really great book if you're into memoirs like me, really emotional memoirs, speaking to identity and to writing. If you're a writer as well, I think you could get a lot from this if you're a creative and creating things that are meaningful to you, not necessarily that can be easily marketed, which is the issue that they had with one of their other books. But yeah, just a really, really great memoir. I always get tongue-tied talking about Emezi's work because it's really good, but it's just really hard for me to wrap my head around it, and even harder to translate that into words. But the next question is best sequel you've read so far in 2021. I feel like I've read a handful of sequels this year, so we might have actually a couple to choose from. I think when it comes to sequels, it would either have to be The Burning God by R.F. Kuang or Mine in My Mind by Octavia E. Butler. And I'm having trouble picking between the two because they're both really different books. They're both, R.F. Kuang's a historical fantasy. It's the end of the trilogy, the finale, and it's just a massive, really, really impressive book about, inspired by Chinese war and mythology. And we see the rise and fall of people. It's hard to talk about. It's the end of a trilogy. That one, but also Mine in My Mind by Octavia Butler comes to mind because, puns. It's a book that I think most closely followed its prequel. And I think that we're able to see a community of supernatural beings really combat a really horrible foe. And I think that idea and that final end scene of what happens, the final battle scene, is most what sticks in my head, and I really love that in a sequel. So Mine in My Mind. And here I am already cheating on this, but I haven't talked about books in a while, so I'm going to give myself the grace and ability to talk about more than one book for each of these questions. The third is new release you haven't read yet but want to. So I pre-ordered 1500 Miles from the Sun by Johnny Garza Villa, and this is a debut from a queer Mexican-American author, and it's YA contemporary. I think it's also sort of romance. And we can thank Audrey for this completely because they had a pre-order sort of hype discussion with Villa, Aiden Thomas, and themselves about this and about Mexican-American YA books. And I think about Selena, they went on this full tangent about Selena that I was yeah, I need to read this. And that was like sold me. I don't even care what this book is about. I'm already clicking the pre-order link. So I need to read this because I pre-ordered it, and it's a new release that has been on my mind. So 1500 Miles to the Sun. And you have to do like the cover, the taking off the cover thing, because it's got like clouds. So if that's not enough reason, and I got the pre-order campaign too, so I can show you the Loteria cards I got too. You'll appreciate that more than probably anyone else. So there's that. I need to read this book. So the next question is your most anticipated release for the second half of the year. And I'm going to be counting just from now when I'm filming onwards the second half of the year. And definitely my most anticipated release is We Are Owed by Ariana Brown. This is a poetry book by a poet that I just really have loved their work in the past. And y'all have probably heard me talk about Sana Sana so much on this channel at this point, but this was their debut chapbook, and I think We Are Owed is their debut poetry book. And she's just a really great poet that I think discusses Mexican American identity and relation, and primarily her Blackness, and within that identity and how they interact, and honestly how just anti-Blackness is just all over within Mexican Americanness. So yeah, according to Goodreads, We Are Owed is the debut poetry collection of Ariana Brown exploring Black relationality in Mexican and Mexican American spaces. So yeah, it was one of those like automatic pre-orders for me. Next up is the biggest disappointment. That one is super easy because it's a book that I've considered doing a rant review for, and that is Inventing Latinos, A New Story of American Racism by Laura E. Gomez. And this is a nonfiction book that I picked up because it was, I guess, the start of what I thought was going to be reading more Latinx, Chicanx nonfiction. And it's a book that I really don't like but at the same time, it made me like examine myself and my positionality and my proximity to whiteness. And I just really wish that this author had not centered so much of that really harmful white supremacist mestizaje methodology in here, because it's so harmful. And I thought that picking up a contemporary book, this book was just published in 2020, a contemporary look at this would be more cognizant of that, but it just read so much like 90s Chicanx lit that I thought we left in the past. We definitely don't need that anymore. So it's just really disappointing. I have a lot to say about it, but not very coherently. And it's definitely made me like examine that and sit with that within myself in quiet and listen to Black and Indigenous Latinx peoples discussing anti-Blackness and anti-Indigenous sentiments. So yeah, maybe I'll film that one day, but so disappointing of a read. So the next question is my biggest surprise, and that one is also easy because that one's one that brought me a lot of joy. So I want to talk about White Whiskey Bargain by Jody Slaughter. This is a contemporary romance that follows, I think it's a marriage of convenience trope between two rival families, the heads of two rival families that are moonshiners. It is so good. Like, this was a book I think was recommended by Alyssa Cole on some podcast at some point, and that's what initially put it on my radar. So I'm not like super surprised that I loved it because obviously Alyssa Cole recommended it, and I really have enjoyed Alyssa Cole's romances. This one, I think what was most surprising of it for me was I never saw myself as someone that liked marriage of convenience tropes, because I don't think I've read enough of them, to be honest. But this was my first, especially in contemporary romances. This one just shocked me because I thought that the hero, he's also Mexican American, was so caring in their relationship and really like wanted to make it work. And I think that that is what sealed the deal for me. The heroine is also Black and she's the head of her family. So family is also really important to her. And they kind of see eye to eye with that. And that kind of just follows through with their businesses, caring for each other's ancestral, like their family's legacies, not ancestral, their family's legacies is really important to both of them. So they share that. And I think it just shocked me because it had action scenes. There was like fights, and there was really great steamy romance in this as well. There's a scene where he makes her pozole, and that was delicious. So a lot of this, I think, just surprised me and just worked really well for me. So yeah, white whiskey bargain. Next question is favorite new author, debut, or new to you? Ooh, this is a good one because I don't know. So I think I definitely want to go with Alan Lopez because I read To Love and Mourn in the Age of Displacement, which I'm pretty sure Jocelyn gifted me at some point. So thank you, Jocelyn, as well as Intergalactic Travels, Poems from a Fugitive Alien. Both of these poetry collections were so good. And I think that their work in particular at examining the relationship and their identities as being Black and Indigenous and Mexican and an immigrant are all really important conversations to have in the face of anti-Blackness that is rampant in Latinx spaces. So that's why I really love their work. And I think that they, along with Ariana Brown, who are, I think, good friends, they're both on a poetry tour together, have really just invigorated my love for poetry and have really made me interrogate my positionality within Latinx spaces as well. So because of that, definitely Lopez is a new favorite debut new to me author. Next question is newest fictional crush. And I think every year in this tag, I say that I don't have crushes, and that's still true, but I'm gonna borrow what Jocelyn does for this question and name a OTP. And I have to go with Pink Slip by Katrina Jackson because this is a contemporary romance featuring a polyamorous relationship with the main character on the cover, whose name I've already forgotten, and two spies, a married couple. And I have never read a poly romance, and I loved their relationship with each other. Like, they all love each other so much, and they're all attracted to each other so much. And it's a really, really fun, unrealistic, like just a really fun time of a spy novel and romance all together in one. And I loved getting to know them. I loved being in each of their heads and just understanding the love and care that they take with their relationship was heartwarming. And I really, really am glad that I've started this series finally. I feel like Yvette has been talking about it for so long. Okay, the next question is my newest favorite character. I think I'm going to go with a graphic novel. I rented this from the library, so I don't have it anymore, but it's called Measuring Up, and it's a middle grade graphic novel that follows a Taiwanese American girl who has entered a baking competition, a cooking competition, in order to win the prize money so she can bring her grandmother over to pay for the plane ticket for her to come visit her in the US. And I think she's my favorite new character. I really love this graphic novel too. I thought it was just a really really nice slice of life story about a girl that misses her grandmother terribly and will do anything for her grandmother and her family, and has somehow found a way to incorporate her love of cooking in that. And I think that because of all those things, because of her determination and her ability to also incorporate her passion in her determination and her dedication to her family, made her a very memorable favorite character for me. Next up is a book that made you cry, or the saddest book that you've read. I know for 120%, let's just go there. The saddest book that I read this year is definitely Praise Song for the Butterflies by Bernice L. McFadden. This is a backlist title, I think. No, not really, from 2018. That follows a young girl from West Africa that becomes Trakosi, which in that culture means pretty much that her family has sold her as into sex slavery at a very young age. I think she was like 12 or 9. She's 9 years old, which in that culture is a religious shrine where that child, that usually young girl, has to atone for her family's sins. It is a heartbreaking story. Lots and lots of trigger warnings for this book as well. So I would definitely recommend you seek those out if you need them. I will link those in the description below. But it's a really sad book because of the content, because of the story here. There is an ending, and there is a somewhat satisfactory ending to this, I think. But for me, I think this book is just really, really well written. I'm really glad that I read something by McFadden now, because I can see why many people have compared her to Toni Morrison's writing and Toni Morrison's work, because I think that her book is super short, but the power that she has to make you feel so strongly with very short chapters, very direct sentences, is a skill in itself. And I think that this is a very memorable book because it made me very, very sad. But yeah, that's Praise Song for the Butterflies. Next up is a book that made you happy. Book that made me happy. I'm gonna go with a reread because I reread A Sprinkle of Spirits along with the Full of Sugar Magic trilogy this, I think, spring. And A Sprinkle of Spirits is definitely my favorite of the bunch. For me, upon a reread, the thing that stuck out most to me is the relationship between the parents and the children in this book. All of the parents speak to their children like fully realized human beings, because they are, and communicate to them when they make mistakes. And that stuck out to me so much because I think it's such a harmful thing when parents are unable to admit their faults and unable to use that to sort of a teaching tool to kids in order to be empathetic to others. And that's something that really stuck out to me here. And also it creates community because people are able to, parents and children are able to work together in order to make lives better. And I love that about this book. So this book made me very, very happy. I just realized I didn't even tell you what this book is about, but if you haven't heard me like word vomit about this in a while, this is the second book in the Love Sugar Magic series, which follows the Logroño family, who are Cocinera Brujas. It mostly follows the youngest, named Leonora, Leo for short, who is the youngest daughter of the four, who hasn't come into her magic yet and who is trying to figure out what her particular magic power is. So that's what this series is all about. Also, it's very good, so you should read it if you haven't already. But the next question is your most beautiful book you've bought so far this year. I think I'm gonna go with another Octavia Butler book. I bought this bind up, this Library of America, I think is what it is. Bind up of Kindred, Fledgling, and Collected Stories. I think that I've never really had one of these books before, and honestly the cover, it has her on it, so I really love that. She's looking outward on that she's sitting there very serenely looking forward, because she was always looking forward. The way that these books are made is really nice. The pages just feel like they're not too thin, but like they're kind of floppy in a way. I don't know. And it's got like a cool bookmark made into it. Most books should have. Why don't more hardcovers like have made ribbon bookmarks in them? So I think that just made me feel like it's a very long-lasting, beautiful book. So in that way, I think this is a beautiful book. And I've always wanted to get, like, I want to have and own all of her writings. And I think it's pretty cool that this has two of the books that I don't have yet. So that's what makes this a beautiful book to me. And the last question is, what books do you need to read by the end of the year? The dreaded question, right? What books do I need to read by the end of the year? Let's just name a handful, because you know there's more than a handful. Continuing on my reread journey this year, I definitely want to reread Certain Dark Things by Sylvia Moreno Garcia. This is my first and like favorite book from Sylvia Moreno Garcia, and I definitely want to reread it. It's a vampire noir story taking place in Mexico, and I really loved it, so I want to reread that this year. I have The Cooking Gene by Michael W. Tweedy. This is a book I bought last year, and it's a, I think, food memoir following Tweedy. It says Southern food is integral to American culinary tradition. So this is a unique memoir that Tweedy takes readers to the white-hot center of the fight, tracing the roots of his own family and the charged politics surrounding the origins of soul food, barbecue, and all Southern cuisine. And I've heard Tweedy speak about this book so many times. He was also on the Netflix series High on the Hog, and he spoke in that as well, which is a docuseries about Black American food and how Black people have shaped American cuisine. All that is super interesting to me, and I've been meaning to read this book for a while. I'll say this one too. Let's talk about The Injustice Never Leaves You by Monica Muniz Martinez, and this is Anti-Mexican Violence in Texas. This is a book that Yvette actually gifted me when she realized I wanted to read more Latinx nonfiction, especially Texan history. This is something I've been kind of interested in a lot lately, especially with currently with Texas's aims to ban critical race theory and just really factual Texas history. That's something that I've been interested in a lot because history, right? Like it's really interesting to see white men try to reframe and recontextualize and just rewrite history completely. So this is something Yvette read and she really recommended to me as I was discussing with her my aims and goals for reading that sort of nonfiction. And this is from the back, says, between 1910 and 1920, self-appointed protectors of Texan-Mexican border, including members of the famed Texas Rangers, murdered hundreds of ethnic Mexicans living in Texas, many of whom were American citizens. So it's a groundbreaking work of historical reconstruction. The Injustice Never Leaves You has upended Texas' sense of its own history. So these are all things that I'm interested in, so definitely this book too. Okay, lastly, for real, I have The City We Became by N.K. Jemisin. This is a book that I've been meaning to get to. I keep checking out from the library and it keeps haunting me because I never get to it, but I need to read this. And this is her newest, I think, fantasy. I think it's an urban fantasy that takes place, I know, in New York City. And I think that each of the boroughs in New York City kind of manifests as a being. That's what I've heard. I don't know. I need to read it. But The City We Became. With that, I think that's the last question. Hopefully I didn't miss any. But yeah, that is the mid-year book freakout tag. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that you enjoyed it. If you have anything to say about any of the books I mentioned today, or if you just want to say hi in the comments, that'd be much appreciated. But that's all I have for today's video. So thank you so much for watching and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.